Yo, 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 yo. Welcome to 2026 this morning, Thursday, December 4th. You know what that means? Tomorrow is the World Cup draw. So we started this thing for me back in summer, maybe early spring, looking at the qualifiers. And now we're getting close to the reality of World Cup 2026, or at least as much as we can know tomorrow and then again on Saturday. So getting close. Lots of people looking at the draw, doing their group of deaths, their easiest groups, doing simulations. We're not going to do that here. What we're going to look at is from the USAA perspective, what may the draw look like and what can you learn based on what's in the two spots, what teams are still available. So just some extra info to look at the draw. Most of you probably don't care about this, but I think it's kind of fun to look at all the possibilities and permutations. So yeah, let's jump right in. Basically, we're looking at the options for USA and, in a sense, Canada and Mexico. So in pot two, there's four possible options: Europe, Africa, South America, Asia. Obviously there's different teams in there, but those are the options from pot two. And then we're going to look at, if we draw this team from pot two, what does that mean for three? What does it mean for four? And there's a few other considerations as well, based on only two UEFA teams, only four groups with two UEFA teams, and also an Asian team can't draw another Asian team. The same with South America and Africa, and of course CONCACAF. So let's just play out some of these scenarios. So if the US draws a South American team in pot two, Colombia, Uruguay, or Ecuador, what does that mean for the rest of the draw? So obviously then can't get CONCACAF teams, cross them out. Can't get the Intercontinental Playoffs because Jamaica's in one, Suriname in the other. So we can't get that. And then there's no South American teams in pot four, but there is a South American team in pot three, Paraguay. So that is the only then limiting factor in pot three. And then going forward, if pot three, the US does not draw Norway or Scotland, so Europe, then that means they must draw a European team in pot four. So another thing you could look at. And if pot three is a UEFA team, so if US draws Norway or Scotland in pot three, then pot four, anything is possible, except CONCACAF and, like I said, the Intercontinental Playoff. So that is sort of the most open option. So some examples of this would be USA, Uruguay, Tunisia, and then have to have a UEFA playoff spot. Or maybe maybe tougher, I don't know. That'd be USA, Uruguay, Norway, and Jordan. So getting Norway frees up any possibility in pot four, but drawbacks, you draw Norway. Next, what if the US draws an African team in pot two? So that's only two options, Morocco or Senegal. So that's the same as we had before. If pot three is not Scotland or Norway, then pot four becomes UEFA for sure. And you can see because there's so many African teams in pot three, there's not that many options for pot three, just six teams. So it would be one South American team, three Asian teams, and the two European teams we talked about earlier. So if we do get Scotland or Norway, then that opens up the fourth pot again to be anything except for CONCACAF and Africa. So that would look like possibilities of Jordan, New Zealand, the four UEFA teams. So you can see as we do this, some of these groups do get dwindled down, especially in this case with the African team, getting them in pot two because we can't get African teams then in pot three or four. That does limit the possibilities. A few examples here would be US, Morocco, Qatar, and a UEFA playoff spot. Another option, USA, Morocco, Scotland, New Zealand, possible. And then sort of the toughest one will be USA, Morocco, Norway, and a UEFA playoff spot, which again, if we draw Africa and then get it is quite possible, a third of a chance to get European team, and then 75% chance? No, 66% chance to get a European team in pot 4 as well. So that could be a tougher draw. Next, we've got what if the US draws an Asian team in pot 2? So that's Japan, Australia, Iran, South Korea. Probably think these are easier teams, most likely, when you look at the totality of the pot, but then that may make it more difficult down the road. So this is kind of similar to CAF, but there are fewer Asian teams in pot 3, so that opens up more possibilities, and the likelihood, more than 50% chance of drawing an African team in pot 3. And again, if pot 3 is not Scotland or Norway, then pot 4 must be UEFA. If pot 3 is UEFA, then our options would be UEFA, New Zealand, or CAF, because Jordan can't get them because it's Asia. And if we look at other options, that would be the likelihood of getting Africa in pot 3 would mean no Africa in pot 4. So that would lead the possibilities to not New Zealand. It would have to be UEFA, as I said just before. What if the US draws a European team in pot 2? So this does really open up the possibilities and have probably very little predictability. So it's unknown if that will prevent the US from drawing a European team in pot 3. I'm not quite sure what the computers will do. On paper, they're not saying that that's a possibility. They're not saying that they will prevent European teams in pot 3 from going into a group that already has a European team. Makes sense? But they might have that built in and then just save the 4 European teams for pot 4. Possible. Because it's not written like that, there's the danger of getting a tough group. Like I said, pretty much open. And then whoever you draw in pot 3 in this scenario can't be drawn in pot 4. This goes for UEFA, where previously that wasn't the case, because this would put 2 UEFA teams in the US's group already. So I think a lot of people looking at that if we get a European team in pot 2, it gives the US a better chance to get a weaker team in pot 3. Maybe 4, but probably 3. So that would mean all the African teams are available and all the Asian teams are available. So, it depends where you kind of make that cutoff, but obviously Qatar, Uzbekistan, Saudi Arabia would be, I think, sought after draws, and that could happen if we get an African team. But also then in South Africa, Tunisia, maybe that's kind of the cutoff there of teams that are easier, but more likely to get an easier team in pot 3. And if we were to get a Asian team in pot 3, then that opens up the possibility of Cape Verde, Ghana, and New Zealand, usually a possibility. So if we get an African team, then it's Jordan, New Zealand, or UEFA. So a lot of those are some interesting options and likely easier. But then when we look at it on paper, still could be tough. USA, Croatia, Qatar, Cape Verde, I think that would be like the ideal option. Another option, USA, Croatia, Paraguay, and a UEFA playoff. And then maybe not a group of death, because again, only 2 European teams, but USA, Croatia, Norway, and then just throwing in there Jordan, because can't get a UEFA team. So there's pretty limited options then in pot 4. So yeah, this is kind of a way to look at, what are the options. By the time we get to pot 4, the options will be pretty limited. A little bit of that is because the US will be sort of third of these CONCACAF teams, because Canada and Mexico are in Group A and B, US is in Group D, so they go in order of the groups generally, if there's no exclusions. So that's, like I said, by the time we get to pot 4, we'll have a good idea of who is remaining. And just kind of overall, because the pots are larger, teams are more spread out. They aren't based on confederation, they're totally based on FIFA rankings. That is possible because there are so many teams, and there's a way to move things around if there's too many Asian teams or African teams or something like that. So they'll have the computers pretty much know which is possible and which is not. And that's not like previous draws. So this means there's fewer things we can know. Maybe before it would be if we draw an African team, we can't get an Asian team, full stop. Or if we get a South American team, we can't get an African team, something like that. And then in addition, these pots are larger, so 12 teams instead of 8. So bottom of pot 2 now, would have been pot 3. Bottom of pot 3 would have been pot 4. So it just gives more possibilities, but also shifts the quality of the teams down a bit. So again, if you look at pot 2, those teams at the bottom not as difficult as the ones at the top, and the same really goes for pot 3. So quite a variety of quality in pot 3. In fact, looking back at it, I think the US has drawn a European team. Europe's dominated the allocation in previous World Cups. I think they had 14 of the 32 teams, maybe one year's 13 or 12, something like that. But almost half the teams. So I think the US has drawn 2 European teams in every World Cup, just based on the way the pots go and how they divided up teams. Yeah, so 94, Romania, Switzerland. 98 was Yugoslavia, Germany. 2002, Portugal, Poland. 2006, Italy, Czech Republic. 2010, England, Slovenia. 2014, Germany, Portugal, group of death. 2018, and then last World Cup, 22, Qatar, was Wales and England. So yeah, every World Cup in recent memory, US has had 2 European teams. I guess there's a third of a chance of that happening. So only 4 of the 12 groups will have 2 European teams. So interesting there. Another strange thing, the US has, since the field has gone to 32 teams, which was 98, the US has never drawn a South American team. So maybe that will happen this time. And then just some of my takes. Definitely want to avoid Norway in pot 3. They have a lower FIFA ranking based on history, not current times. They have a strong squad. Maybe you want to avoid path A and D. If you look at the rankings, that would be the Europeans, Italy and Denmark, which would make for a tougher group because those teams are high in the rankings. But Italy's not what they used to be, and there's no guarantee that they make it. Same with pot D, Denmark. They would have been, I think, pot 2, but that would have been not an easier pot 2 team, but sort of a mid-level pot 2 team. So don't necessarily want them at pot D. And personally hope to avoid Colombia in pot 2. I think they are a very strong team. So my predictions based on what we talked about, I think we'll get UEFA in pot 2, so that would be Austria, Croatia, or Switzerland. And then that would leave likelihood of CAF or Asia in pot 3. I'm not really going on a limb here. And then pot 4, UEFA or New Zealand. All those would be possibilities because we have the UEFA in pot 2. So, what did you learn? Not much. Hopefully something. Again, another way to look at the draw. Kind of, if we get to pot 4 and don't have a European team, we'll get one for sure. That's one of the few things we know. And then, obviously, if we get an African team, can't get another one. If we get an Asian team in pot 2 or an African team, can't. Real tomorrow, World Cup draw. Been waiting for this. I hope the fortunes favor your team, but it is just a draw. Anything can happen once we play the matches. I think 48 teams. Who knows? Enjoy. Peace.